Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Theravada Buddhism series, Dhamma talk number 32. Ahetuka Ceta, Rootless Consciousness, Part 2. In Part 1 of Rootless Consciousness, we discussed or described in general in this talk we are going to talk about each and every rootless consciousness, ahetuka ceta. Each of the 18 rootless consciousness is individualized based on nature, such as wholesome, unwholesome, functional, feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, and kinds of consciousness. There are 3 factors involved in this classification of rootless consciousness: nature, feeling, and kinds of consciousness. This rootless consciousness is divided into 3 groups. First of all, like wholesome, unwholesome, and functional. So let's see what unwholesome resultant consciousness. Ahetuka vipaka ceta. There are 7 of them. The first one is, in Pali it sounds like this: Upekha Sahagata Sakhu Vijnana. In this Pali phrase, Sakhu is I, Vijnana is awareness. So it means I consciousness, or you can call it seeing consciousness. And this seeing consciousness function is to see with neutral feeling and represent the first moment of awareness of a form or object. You remember seeing consciousness in your meditation? Whenever you see something right away, you note it, seeing, meaning seeing consciousness. That is the first moment of seeing, the first moment of contact. The object, eye sensitivity, and awareness, phassa. Only that moment nothing beyond that. At that moment, there is a neutral feeling. But the next consciousness beyond that is not neutral anymore. It can go into any direction based on one's attitude. That's why seeing consciousness function is to see with neutral feeling, and it is precisely at the moment of first contact with the object. And this seeing consciousness results from unwholesome karma of past lives. Therefore, all the forms you encounter, is undesirable and ugly. Because your past karma is unwholesome. We are talking about unwholesome resultant consciousness. So every object you encounter now will be undesirable and ugly. So, as it is undesirable and ugly, automatically it will give rise to unpleasant feeling. That is the cause and effect in sequence. One see undesirable object, you have an unpleasant feeling. But there's an exception one needs to be very careful about to understand this sequence. Because one person undesirable object can be the desirable object for another person. As an example, blue cheese is an undesirable object for most people. But there are some people who like blue cheese very much. For that group, blue cheese is a desirable object. So this pleasant or unpleasant feeling that will arise is dependent on one likes and dislikes. If the object is ugly, it is ugly as it is. Because that is the natural law, natural phenomena. But there's one exception. Individual likes and dislike will decide what is and what is not. But in general, unpleasant, undesirable object produce unpleasant feeling. Unwholesome actions of the past life produce unwanted objects at present. general principle. So when one becomes engaged or encounter with the unpleasant object or a condition or a situation, normally we like to find a scapegoat and blame and put the fault on somebody. But if you know the principle of mind and matter, you won't blame anybody. You won't blame a lousy situation on anyone. What do? Solve the crisis with wise attention. Instead of blaming and falling and finding a scapegoat, simply solve the crisis with wise attention. Yoniso manasikara. So we use one consciousness, particularly seeing consciousness, which is the result of past unwholesome actions. Of course, we have already established this is rootless. Try to explain in detail this one particular consciousness, which is seeing consciousness. And also, seeing consciousness is associated or accompanied by neutral feeling. At the first moment of contact phassa. Why? This is how my teachers explain why. Rupa, materiality or matter, there are 28 properties. Out of the 28, 4 are Mahabhuta, 4 great elements. And the remaining 24 are dependent upon these 4 great elements. So there are 2 groups, 4 great elements and the remaining 24 dependent matter on the 4 great elements. In general, there's another name. These 4 great element group is called hard materiality. And the 24 dependent qualities are called soft materiality. Hard materiality and soft materiality. Hard materiality is earth, wind, fire and water, in short. But water is something you cannot really detect or touch. Cohesion, the power of cohesion or dispersion. But earth, hardness, you can feel it. Heat, hot or cold, you can feel it. Wind, the movement, vibration, you can feel it. So those 3 elements, earth, wind and fire, together produce touch sensation. It can be touch and feel. Those 3 elements, earth, wind and fire, is or produced touch sensation, or in Pali, puttapa, Those are the objects of touch. So that is called hard element. And the other 24 is soft element. So we understand what hard element and soft element, or hard materiality or soft materiality, under rupa, matter. Now next step. Let's see seeing consciousness. To have a seeing consciousness, we need 3 factors. One is the eye sensitivity. That is a soft materiality. And the form outside. But the form outside is, you don't go and touch the form with your eye. It's simply the reflection of it. So it is also called soft materiality. So external soft materiality come in touch with the internal soft materiality. When it touches, of course there's awareness. Without awareness, you can't describe anything. At that moment, the feeling that produces very soft, very subtle, very dull. That is why the feeling it produces, neutral feeling, upekha. Upekha vedana, neutral feeling. That's the reason eye consciousness is always associated with neutral feeling. That is how my teacher taught me. So we have discussed in detail about rootless, unwholesome, resultant consciousness. The first one is seeing consciousness. And the second consciousness is hearing consciousness. The third one is smelling consciousness. The fourth one is tasting consciousness. The flavor. So those 4, seeing, external object, internal object, are soft. And hearing, smelling and tasting are exactly the same as the first one. They are similar to the seeing consciousness. So you can apply the same principle I have discussed to the other 3 more consciousness. In other words, seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, smell consciousness, taste consciousness. They are the same. They have no roots. They are the result, vipaka, of unwholesome karma, and they are associated with neutral feeling. So in this first group, we finished 4 now, based on seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting. The fifth one is body consciousness. In general, It is the same as the first four, except one. Body consciousness, your body sensitivity. That's a soft material. And this soft material come in touch, actually physically touch. So the exterior form or substance or object is hard materiality. Actually, it might be a stick, it might be a blade of glass, grass, hard materiality. So soft materiality and hard materiality come in contact. At that moment, neutral feeling cannot arise. At that moment, unpleasant feeling will arise, because the exterior object, that exterior object you are encountering is the result of unwholesome karma. So definitely that object will produce unpleasant feeling. So the fifth consciousness is exactly the same as the first four, except it is associated with unpleasant feeling, not neutral feeling. That's a difference. In Pali, it's called dukkha sahagata. Dukkha is suffering. Sahagata is accompanied with, together. Kaya viññāna, body consciousness. Number 5. Now, number 6 and number 7 consciousness of this first group. That one, we have discussed about it in fair detail in the last Dharma talks. It's the sense door averting consciousness. If you listen carefully, last lecture, you will know exactly what it is. Sense door averting consciousness. That consciousness arises right after the bhavinga consciousness, life continuum or life constituent. It arises after bhavinga and before the 5 sense consciousness. Okay. 5 sense consciousness, pincha viññāna, which is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. That is number 6. Number 7, if you remember, is called investigating consciousness. This investigating consciousness arises right after the 5 sense consciousness, which is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. 5 sense consciousness. And these 2 consciousness are associated with neutral feeling. Sense door averting consciousness and investigating consciousness. investigating consciousness arises right after the five sense consciousness. And these both are not resultant. Both are functional consciousness, kriya, associated with neutral feeling. If you have digested quite well in the last Dhamma talk, you will understand this clearly. If not, it might sound very confusing. Okay, those are the 7 kinds of consciousness in the first group, which is rootless, unwholesome, resultant, akusala, unwholesome, resultant consciousness. The second group is 8 wholesome, resultant consciousness. So the first group and second group, the difference is, the first one is unwholesome, the second one is wholesome, kusala. And in this group, the first 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is seeing, hearing, smelling, and tasting consciousness. Okay. They are similar to the first 4 of the first group, except the difference is wholesome and unwholesome. That's the only difference. Wholesome, resultant consciousness. So if you understand the first 4 of the first group, you understand this second 4 of the second group. Substitute wholesome for unwholesome. And also they are associated with neutral feeling, just like the first one. Now number 5. Number 5 is body consciousness of wholesome resultant. It is exactly the same as number 5 of the first group, except this is the wholesome kusala group, so the feeling is pleasant feeling. That's a difference. And the 6th consciousness is wholesome, functional, receiving consciousness. So receiving consciousness, but it belongs to the wholesome kusala, and also it is kriya, functional, and it is associated with neutral feeling. That's a 6. And 7 and 8. This second group has 8 kinds of consciousness. The first group have 7 kinds. This has 8 kinds. Why one more? Let's see. 7 and 8. They are 2 together. 7 and 8, they are 2. It is wholesome, kusala, functional, kriya, investigating consciousness. Number 7, one of the consciousnesses is associated with neutral feeling. Because whenever you encounter a dull or not very interesting object, you have a neutral feeling. But the number 8 is, there are times you encounter an object of high interest, or in other words, you like it very much, or in other words, the object has a very desirable quality. And when the object is desirable quality, your feeling is pleasant. So 7 and 8 is exactly the same, except one has a neutral feeling and another one has a pleasurable or pleasant feeling. That is the second group. Now the third group, there are 3 of them. The first group has 7, the second group has 8, the third group has 3. 3 of them. They are rootless, no root, ahetuka. Functional, kriya, citta, consciousness. The fourth group is called rootless, functional consciousness. Okay, what is kriya, citta, functional consciousness? Let's go through that little definition first. Any consciousness with no roots and does not produce a wholesome or unwholesome result. It does not produce wholesome or unwholesome result. It has no roots. That kind of consciousness is called functional consciousness, kriya. Now, this one is resultant functional consciousness, ahetuka, with no roots. The first one is 5 sense door adverting consciousness. Five sense door adverting consciousness. It associated with it neutral feeling. It associated with neutral feeling. That is one of the kriya citta. Second one is determining or mind door adverting consciousness, and it associates with neutral feeling. So this one has 2 names, if you remember. One is called determining consciousness, another name is mind door adverting consciousness. Why 2? Let's call it determining consciousness. One is called determining consciousness. How it operates is, first of all, you have a sense object. You have to turn towards it. You have to see or hear it. And then you received it. And then you investigate it. And after investigation, you make a decision. This is good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant. They go through the whole sequence directly with the sense object. When the operation is like that, it's called determining consciousness. Uttappanna in Pali. But let's say the same object you are talking about, a rose that you have saw or seen, and the next day you think about it. You think about the same rose, basically recall. At that time, you are not actually touching. It is happening at the mind door. Thoughts, recall thoughts of planning, thoughts of scheming, thoughts of imagination. They don't have the actual physical object to start with. It is the mental image, mental recall, mental creation. So it happened right at the mind door. That's why it's called mind door adverting consciousness. The same thing, they have two functions. Just like, let's say, you're an accountant at your work. So your title is accountant. But for some reason there are new courses coming up and your company sends you to go and attend the night classes for that course. So every evening you have to go to the class and attend to get a special credit for it. In the class, you are a student. Daytime, you are an accountant. At nighttime, you are a student. Still you. The same consciousness, just like that. When it is doing the determining work, it's a determining consciousness. When it is doing the mind or adverting function, it's called mind or adverting consciousness. That's why this particular consciousness has two names, wearing different hats when they are doing a different function. That is number 2 of the group 3. The last one is called smile producing consciousness, and it is associated with pleasant feeling. When you smile, that is when you're happy, when it is pleasant. Smile producing consciousness. In Pali, it's called Somanasa Sahakata Hasitupa Jeta. Somanasa is like pleasant. Sahasrata is accompanied with a pleasant feeling. Hasitupa is smile producing. Jeta, consciousness. Smile producing consciousness associated with pleasant feeling. It is a rootless ahituka. We have to keep on putting rootless because we are discussing the rootless ahituka. Rootless functional consciousness. It arises only in Buddhas and arahants. In Buddha and arahants, they smile, but of course, as soon as smile, there's a pleasant feeling, but it doesn't transform into wholesome karma or unwholesome karma. That's why it is kariya, functional. This kariya is you can find in this group, and there are many other groups you can find them. That's why we need to specify which group it belongs to. This group is ahetuka, rootless, functional consciousness. 3. So 7 plus 8 plus 3, 18. And out of this 18 rootless consciousness, if you split them one by one and add it up, 14 are associated with neutral feeling, 2 associated with pleasant feeling from mental source, somanasa, pleasant feeling arising from mental source, and 1 is associated with pleasant feeling from the physical source. It's called sukha. Somanasa is mental source, sukha is physical source. And the other one is associated with unpleasant feeling, dukkha, unpleasant feeling from the physical source. Those are all feeling vedana. 14 is neutral feeling. 2 is somanasa, pleasant feeling from mental source. 1 is unpleasant feeling from physical source, and 1 is pleasant feeling from physical source. These are the factors that are used to differentiate one consciousness to the other. So this concludes the 18 rootless consciousness. So far we have discussed 12 akusala, unwholesome consciousness, and 18 ahetuka, rootless consciousness. We have covered 30 of them. So may all of you be able to understand theoretically how each consciousness is classified and defined. Understand intellectually, and in some cases apply to the practice or the experience of your meditation. And that way you have an all-rounded understanding, both practical and theory. For those who want to pursue wisdom in a deeper way, this is the way. But for enlightenment, to be free from suffering, you don't need these details, but direct experience and the general understanding. Depending on your pursuit, follow your own path. May all of you be able to pursue the path of freedom in your own way and attain liberation as soon as possible. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much.